Hello, and welcome to our weekly LinkedIn Live leadership series, Voices of Leadership. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Kathy Eastwood, your host and founder of C equals Y. Each week, we explore the fascinating world of leadership, featuring voices from various generations, industries, backgrounds, and functions. A team's job is about delivering business results. The role of the leader is to inspire and enable the people and team to deliver those results. And there's a repeatable formula to drive that success. E3 Leadership Code: express plus engage plus execute, powered by emotions. However, each leader's approach to applying that code is unique because there's no one way to lead. And our live sessions really aim to showcase these diverse voices of leadership. And as we meet our leaders, we'll uncover what drives them, explore their unique leadership style, core values, etc. So before we get started and before I introduce our guest today, please let's make this interactive. So share your name. You can put your LinkedIn post in there. This is an opportunity to network with everyone. And also, please ask questions. And I'll start off with one. What do you prefer more, the beach or a mountain vacation? And I say that because I'm going on vacation shortly. But let me now introduce our guest today, Brian Fletcher. He's the co-founder of FM and someone I've had the pleasure of getting to know through our shared passion for building teams. Also about delivering value and staying curious in the face of change. Brian's career spans 2 decades, from writing code to leading global engineering teams for some of the most world's famous recognized brands like Google, CNN, Lowe's, just to name a few. But what makes Brian's story so compelling isn't just the resume. It's how he's navigated the journey from engineer to CTO with empathy, experimentation, and a ton of self-awareness. So, Brian, welcome. I'm so excited to have you with us today. We've been talking about this for a while now.
Yeah,
So let's kick things off. So for those that don't know you yet, and I
yeah,
just did a really brief introduction, why don't you begin with your journey and tell us what really shaped your path from software engineer to executive?
yeah. Thanks so much, Kathy, and really thank you so much for having me on the show. Yeah, I think you did a really good job summarizing it. I'll just say that. But I started my early career in software development. I always tell everyone I lied my way into my first job. It was early days of the internet, and there was a lot of excitement and hype. Which, spoiler alert, we're in a similar time right now. But I kind of parlayed that into a job. I'd always been very technical, and I don't have a computer science degree on, not obviously, but I do not have a computer science degree, but I've always been very technically minded. My early days, and when I was a teenager, I would like experiment with like different coding blocks and etc. So I just knew I was always there. So anyway, I parlayed that into a software engineering job, which really, for me, it was like this watershed moment for me. I was like, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. It was very, very visceral. And I just love solving problems. I love building solutions, more importantly. And it's just everything about software development spoke to me and my skill set. I'm also a musician. I've been playing drums pretty much my whole life, and there's a software engineering and
There.
musician connection. There's also like a musician and creative connection as well. So that's probably just something that's kind of innate in me. Anyway, but that was my early career, cutting my teeth in software development. And, I describe it as peeling the onion. Just what is that? What's that thing? How do I learn about that? What's a database? What's this backend API and all that stuff? So I effectively built my own computer science degree through my career. And then, talking about my journey, I was also, I think, pretty good at explaining technical concepts to non-technical people,
Mm,
which is a very specific skill. A lot of brilliant engineers have a real difficult time doing that. And I will say that anyone who can do that um, has a career progression that looks different than becoming more and more of an architect or whatever, which is a totally viable career path. But it puts you in a different bucket. And so I became the team lead, leading projects. And then I became leading a group of engineers for multiple projects. And then, it just keeps going up and being more and more a leadership role. My early career was in startups and, software development, but kind of within about 5-6 years, I moved into the digital agency space. And that's where I spent the majority of my career. So I spent, pretty much 2 decades in global digital agencies. And so, and eventually became CTO of the last job I had. So I was the CTO of an international agency, and had great clients, like you mentioned, Google, Lowe's, et cetera. I love the agency world because I just get connected to a lot of different businesses, learn more. It's just about continually learning, you know?
Yep.
And that's just another kind of great passion of mine. So always saying yes to the next opportunity. And that got me pretty far, I'd say. So that's kind of my career. And then, I left the agency world last year and I decided to do my own thing. I feel like this is the right time. We're going back to the original, premise that there's a lot of chaos happening right now in technology with AI and how it's reinventing so many things. And I'm capitalizing on that moment to start a software consultancy built in the age of AI. And that's what FM is. So it's a different stage of my career. It's building a company. Less people to manage right now, but looking to build a company. So
I just want to, we have an audience that comes from all different industries and functions. When you say digital agency, give a little background for someone that's in accounting that may not be in that world.
That's a great question. Yeah. So, I think everyone knows like the Madison Avenue advertising agencies like Ogilvy and something like that. So think about an agency in that space, right? A lot of very marketing and advertising type activities across, a wide variety of industries, both public and private. And so a digital agency is just the digital version of that. I actually worked for Ogilvy in their Ogilvy One division back in my earlier career. I worked for companies like Razorfish, and Huge was another one I worked with. And so that's what a digital agency means. So it is a services industry, mostly delivering digital experience, a wide variety of digital experiences. I have a lot of experience in the marketing technology space. So that's like content management systems, these like global enterprise systems that we're building for really large clients, but also more kind of cutting edge experiential computer vision, et cetera. So anything digital. And for me, it's a digital product. It's an experience that you use, not just, integrations and stuff like that. Does that help?
Yeah, no, it's good. Like, I kind of know, but it goes to the conversation we were having before we jumped on.
Yeah.
Sometimes we forget all of the stuff we know, right? And it's an opportunity to educate other people when we're new audiences and things like that.
Yep, exactly.
So excellent. So tell us about the new company first.
Yeah, so I talked about it a little bit. So FM is it's a software consultancy built in the age of AI, and we think that we're really focused on reinventing the digital product services relationship between consultants and clients. We're fully embracing an entirely new process of how we deliver software for our clients, leveraging AI, assisted tooling or different modern, software delivery techniques. A lot of what we do is not AI. It's just really just smart, building of digital products that I've learned throughout my career. So we're combining both of those to really, in my mind, deliver much faster, much more efficiently at a higher degree of quality. And I look at it with regards to like the math has changed for this. So something that took us 6 to 9 months is now taking us 6 to 9 weeks sometimes. Or you're able to prototype something and get it in front of a user much more quickly and at a much higher fidelity. So that whole dynamic of how that's changed is really what FM is focused on, for the most part. Like let's reinvent this process. And we have a saying at FM, which is software within reach, which for us means that when you're able to deliver software more efficiently, more quickly, you could actually deploy custom solutions to more opportunities in business, which we don't think everyone's quite realized yet, right? So right now it's about how can I replace an engineer or whatever. No, we can deploy more software. And we think that that's really compelling for our clients to say, like, I didn't think I could do that. Now I can.
Yep.
So we're helping advise our clients on how you would do that. So we can be your innovation arm. We can really rapidly deliver products for you. We can do use case analysis. And we can do AI adoption, right? I think the other side of the coin from me with FM is that we can deliver software in a different way, but now actually that software can do different types of things.
Yep.
With a large language model and AI driven solution, it gets in this world of like more open-ended experiences and less what we call deterministic experiences, meaning it's like not if this, then that. It's like you throw something in a large language model and it kind of makes a decision about what to do next. That's really exciting to me. And that's what I mean by software can do new things. So there's things like agentic solutions or just some really amazing AI powered automations that you can do, which we're also digging into very, very, just it's really fun. Super
Yeah.
fun. Yeah.
And you touched on this when we were doing the opening, like when you started in your career with the internet, that was new,
Yeah.
right? And that was scary for everyone. And now I think we're at that next and huge inflection point.
We are. We are. And like that's the thing too that I recognize when I founded FM, which was it was just staring me in the face. I've been through these moments in time of these hype cycles and irrational exuberance. Let's just be honest, right? With what this technology can do and what it cannot do, right? So there are inflated expectations these days about what AI. It'll settle back down to reality, but I know how amazing this technology is and how it's fundamentally changing everything. But yeah, it does tie directly back to the rise of the internet, the rise of mobile, the rise of social. Like this is not my first rodeo. I've seen this happen, right? And everything comes through this like hype cycle, and then that it's the Gartner kind of typical kind of flow of these types of technologies as they wash over all of us, right? And yeah, so I think I have some experience in this space, and I'm going to use that to stay grounded as we figure out how to move forward. I know I don't have all the answers, but I'm going to, I think, rely on my expertise in this area, in the area of like disruption through technology, and apply that to AI and help my clients really navigate themselves.
And all of this, Brian, when I think about it, is about leading through change,
Yeah,
right? And that's something now that you've led, your career, a lot of people through that change.
yeah,
And so when you think about leadership and how you show up, do you have
yeah.
any, like, how would you describe your leadership style and what's important to you on helping people through these changes?
Yeah, no, that's great. I think, I've been thinking about this because I knew we'd talk about this. So it's funny, you just go through your life and you have your leadership style. And then I got like, well, what is my leadership style? I am known to be a very calm and steady voice in the room. And that's always been kind of my default mode, is one of stability. And even when I was younger, though, that was just the way I operate. I think you and I were talking about earlier. It's like, um, I would clearly see how we move forward in any kind of a scenario, whether that's we're dealing with an issue or whatever, or a client that's difficult, or the technology is difficult to work with, or whatever. I would see the way through that. So I was the calm, steady voice in the room that would keep us focused and moving forward.
Hmm.
I am not the brash visionary who's got this amazing idea that we're all going to rally the troops for. I'm more of a pragmatist, I would say, if you talk about that as a spectrum, right?
Hmm.
And that's just my strength. I think that's a common thing with engineering leadership, is that pragmatism, because they've just seen so many examples of teams getting stuck and not being able to move forward. Right. But my calm demeanor is interesting to me because I kind of forget that I that's how I am perceived. And so I do lose my temper. And when I do, it surprises the hell out of people because they don't see it coming. Right. Which is just funny. I've got to work on that. I don't always lose my temper, but I have. And it's just like, it's always very shocking to people, which is kind of funny. But I think, if you really start to break down my leadership style, for my teams, I think in terms of my direct reports versus the broader team, right? Those are two different things, especially if you're like a CTO level role, right? So for my direct reports, it's all about partnering with them on helping them navigate their career. It's all about them, right?
Mhm.
You have to be focused on them. It's not about your grand vision for them. It's like, what do you want? Let's help you get there. So it's a lot of coaching with my direct reports. I really want them to feel like a partner with me on this. But then for the departments or an organization, it's about rallying those troops and setting, that visionary direction. You got to set a North Star for everyone to be rowing toward, and, like I said, I haven't always been successful with that. That's one of my own, growth areas, I would say, is setting a stronger direction for the team, but that's, I think, the really important thing about rallying those troops, and, yeah, so that's kind of how I think of it in those terms. Um, yeah, it feels like, that's just like, it's really, and I'll say too, it's like, going back to my direct reports, and you touched on it earlier, but that shift from engineering to management is the most difficult shift. I mean, going from an individual contributor to a
Yes.
manager of people. And so you've spent your entire career building your hard skills of software development. And all of a sudden you're expected to deliver soft skills of team management, of having difficult conversations with people.
Mhm.
And you're just kind of thrown in the deep end. I think a lot of companies do this where they don't provide adequate coaching for those people that are making those transitions. And I've seen a lot of people become very disillusioned when they move. They're like, oh, I thought I made it. And now I'm like starting over again. Um,
It's
you know,
funny you say that because we just had a course that we were doing a lunch and learn yesterday for folks, which was like management fundamentals.
yeah,
Because the number is 58% of people, at least, have never received any kind of training to go into a
yeah,
management role. That's
yeah.
more than half.
It's crazy.
And so you think about it, those people then keep getting promoted, right? Because of the
Yeah,
principles of you've done a good job, so you should be promoted. And
yeah,
then they don't have the skills then to teach the next generation. You're like, oh my gosh, we're
yeah. And
creating.
it erodes over time, right? It kind of, yeah. No, I think you're
Yeah.
absolutely right. And that's and I say a lot of times, like, one thing I really liked about my last role was I had an executive coach that really helped me. And my company paid for, which was really great of them to do that. And because they saw the value of that, they said, if we invest in this coach, which is not that much money in the grand scheme of things for them, but I just benefited so greatly from that. I had basically my own like work therapist, and
Mm,
she was a trained therapist, right? So she could tell me like emotionally or, intellectually or psychologically what I was doing, but she also knew the corporate world and business and was like, she was really pragmatic, right? She's like, I would explain to her what's going on. She's like, okay, well, you're doing this and they're doing this and and she was very like, she would like thread the needle for me and allow me to kind of navigate that situation. It was really, really helpful for me. And I wish companies did that more for people in management.
yeah.
And I'll say too, like, you know, because one world could say, well, if you're not taught the management skills, just bringing someone who's really good at management to lead the engineering team.
Yep.
I've also seen that really fail because you don't have any kind of, bona fide experience in this area, and technology is really challenging, and you
Yeah.
need to be able to go through that as a team. You need to be technically competent. And so that's the right way is to move up through that. But I think we should give those people who are fortunate enough to be able to be promoted in that way, the support to be able to effectively manage, you know.
Yeah. And I appreciate it because that's what we really are focused on because we know that. And one of the things we'll talk about a lot on these calls is around energies of people energy and the
Yeah.
engineering, your calm, cool, collected point of view is very cerebral in thinking, right?
Yep.
It's very operational in nature and it's powerful.
Yeah.
But leadership tends to rely on more of the extroverted side of things. You have to bring your
Yeah.
heart to the table, right? You have to bring empathy. And when you've been coding for a lot of years, you're very comfortable,
Yeah.
in that space. And suddenly now you're needing to interact with people. And you're like, is this where I want to be?
Well, no, it's funny. And what comes to my mind is like, I consider myself an introvert. And when the pandemic happened and all of a sudden I'm working out of our living room, my wife's like, man, you talk a lot, like that's all I do all day is talk, and I, even though I'm an introvert, I think now I actually get a lot of value, or not value. I do enjoy, um, you know, the I enjoy being in a leadership role. I really do. I enjoy those conversations. I enjoy helping people. I enjoy navigating, difficult situations, and I enjoy the pressure and the challenge of it, and so, but it took me a while to get there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really did.
So you mentioned that you had a coach, but before that, did you have any managers that you worked for or that were absolutely stellar and you're like, yep,
Yeah.
I want to be like that, or really horrible and you're like, and I definitely don't want to be like that?
Of course you do, yeah, we'll start with, probably the best, the best example. I had a manager who I worked with for probably, oh, I don't know, 6, 7 years, so a good amount of time. And, he was just really an excellent role model for me. He was a very strategic thinker. He was able to command a room. He knew how to do, like, I was a tech director at the time, right? And he showed me how to be like more of a client relationship person. Here's how you talk to our clients. You got
Mm,
to check in with them. It's typical stuff, but I just didn't know how to do it. So he's walking me through that. Let's invite them to dinner. It's like, doing that stuff. And he believed in me, right? And he was more charismatic, more outwardly influential than I was. So I was learning from him in that way. But when he was talking to me in my one-on-ones, he was 100% focused on me,
mm,
you know, and I could feel him strategizing with me. I mean, we didn't always agree either. Like, he had an idea for me that I didn't agree with, but like, I went along with it because I just trusted him so much, and it was great, and that's the thing I think you said it already. It's like, you don't leave companies, you leave bad managers. Right. And so, he definitely was an influential person in my career. And by the way, like, that's another thing that I always say is that when you get to a certain level, as you rise through an organization, you have less peers.
hmm
When you're an engineer, you got a lot of engineers around you, right? But as you go up, the pool is smaller,
Yep.
and eventually, your peers aren't even in your company.
Mm,
So that manager I told you about, I stay in touch with him, and I have sessions with him. In fact, I was just thinking this week, I gotta text him. We gotta have lunch together. But that's a really interesting point, which is, don't feel that everyone has to be in your company. Keep these relationships
yep.
and nurture them over time, because as you rise through the ranks, you'll want to lean on them more and more, and they'll give you great perspective because they're out of your company and they won't be like institutionalized with the company you're with, right? Um, but yeah, and then on the worst boss, I think, yes, I think the one that comes to mind was, you know, practically abusive, unpredictable.
Mm,
They were very egotistic and had enormous blind spots, wouldn't trust me to do anything. They were not a partner. They were just like this chaos. They were the visionary. They were the visionary, right? And those are interesting personalities because it's just totally different than my style. So we clashed, and it was a very difficult time for me, I would say. Um, but it's funny, I would sign up for it again, to be honest, because I
would
learned
you?
so much. I learned so much from that. Well, would I sign up for it again? Maybe not. But
That's how I'm testing
I
on
can
that one,
say in
but
retrospect, I did get a lot, and I thanked that same individual for a lot of the pressure they put me under. Like, directly thanked them.
hmm
I surprised them when I thanked them, because I was like, I needed that pressure to level up in one specific area.
okay.
And it was helpful. And they gave me some advice here and there. It wasn't always, a difficult time, but it certainly was at one point. But I go back to, like, I had this realization that this person, this leader, was modeling someone else that he respected earlier in his career, and that model of person was what he was emulating.
Yep.
And like I could just said, that best boss for me was just a different type of individual. For some reason, my worst boss was modeling someone that he thought was very effective, I think.
hmm For
And
his
the Yeah,
personality, right? Like, because we all have different styles and we all need different things.
yeah, we do. We do, and we have different goals out of life, and and so, yeah, so even, everything that went wrong is also a learning experience, or everything that was difficult is anything that's, challenging. I appreciate the challenge, I guess is the point. Maybe I wouldn't sign up for it again, but I do appreciate the challenge, and I've got no, I'm very able to separate me from the criticism, if that makes sense. Like, I don't
Yeah.
ever take it personally. In fact, I'm always asking for more direct feedback than I get, like, seriously, what am I messing up on? Right. Tell me. Because if I don't know, I can't correct it.
Yeah.
So I always want that direct feedback, and I never feel like attacked for it. I can get mad and upset, but I'm not, I can separate myself from that.
But and you used a word when you were talking about that was trust.
Yeah.
And I think that trust element of when you have that trust with others and that feedback doesn't feel personal.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. That's
you're
great.
like, oh, wait a minute, this is here so I can get better, or I'm giving
Yeah.
you this feedback so that you can get better. But you need to have that trust first, and you have to
Right.
build that relationship.
Yeah, exactly. And that's it. And it's funny. I was having this conversation this morning. So I was telling you before we started that I'm a member of this like CTO club in Atlanta where I live, and it's great. You get some really good advice. And I was talking to this CTO there this morning, and I was saying something I learned not pretty recently, right? And it's when you're I talked before about as you advance in your career and you get to more leadership roles, the pool gets smaller.
Hmm.
And eventually you're in a room where, let's just say you're leading you're leading a region for an agency, like in my space, or you're leading the entire agency and you're in the C-suite, whatever. Let's just say that's it. Looking around you, all of your peers, none of them know what you know. They don't know, from, in my case, technology.
Hmm.
And the advice I got was this person who had said, like, how they messed up in the C-suite was her example. She's like, I thought my job was to explain to them what I knew to convince them of my ideas being right. I was basically trying to turn them into technologists so that they would understand why my idea is brilliant, or why I think we should go that way. So she spent so much time doing that, and that was the absolute wrong way. She's like, what I should have done is just 100% focused on building relationships with those people.
Yep.
Because once I build relationships, then there's that word trust, Kathy, and then they'll trust me. And it's almost like a shortcut or a cheat code, right? It's just like, just say, how can I help you? What do you need? I'll do it. Right. And,
Yep.
and that was like a big unlock for me. And I said that to the CTO this morning. He's like, oh, I never thought of it that way. You're right. Which is like, we're technology people, at least I am. Yeah.
Yep.
And we just default to that. The technology, that's what got us excited in our career. That's why we're in this industry, or whatever we do, was the technology. Doesn't mean
Yep.
everyone else has that same understanding of it. And that's okay. Right. So anyway, so in any discipline, when you get to a certain level, don't try to like convince someone of why you're so smart. Just try to help them and have that relationship and establish trust.
Yeah, exactly. Because if you were to take a CMO that's on your team, right? Because you don't
Yeah.
need to know how they're going to go market it necessarily. You don't
Yeah.
need to know how the CFO is going to account for everything and make sure you're
Exactly. Yeah.
compliant, right? And
Yeah.
that's why typically when we're talking to teams and coaching them, we'll make sure that there's a good end vision, because that's what creates the glue, right, of the
Yeah.
team. Express the end vision. Where are we going? Why are we doing it?
Yeah.
Then everyone could go execute with their expertise and bring that to the table.
Yeah.
And that's why you have all these different people in the
Exactly. Yeah.
team.
Diverse. Yeah. We all provide something different to this mix that we have. Yeah. Yeah. That's exactly right. And and it's so funny. You get, you sometimes you don't see what's right in front of you. That's the right way, is just to establish that trust. Some of this isn't rocket science. It's just a good old garden variety psychology and people. And that's kind of messy sometimes. Yeah.
Yep,
So, yeah.
absolutely. So, Brian, believe it or not, we're already down at
Oh,
the
really?
bottom. Yeah, I told you it'll go fast. It always does.
Yeah.
Um, Now, for the audience and those that are listening that are in more of that traditional engineering role, that
Yeah.
do want to go up that track and be a CTO, well, first of all, it's not for everyone, right? Would you
Right.
agree that it
Yeah,
is? You
no,
mentioned at the
that's right.
beginning.
And yeah, exactly. It's not for everyone, and that's okay, right? Like, you know, one of the things that I noticed in my last leadership role was that there wasn't a well-defined track for an individual contributor to keep going up towards
Yeah.
that principal or staff engineer role. And I think if that doesn't exist in your company, that's a problem. So try to, hopefully that can be resolved. But like, yeah, I think that I've seen it, and this is the agency perspective. So, I mean, there's totally all kinds of different industries that do it differently, but I'm just telling you my point of view in the agency space was everything was trying to turn an engineer into a technology director
Mm.
who's leading client engagements and doing that. And not everyone is well suited to that. And I think just being honest with yourself, what do you want out of life and what do you want to do with you, and some of them just get really uncomfortable. And I'll say, like, as I navigate through my career, I moved away from technology more and more and more. One thing I am loving right now is that I am literally day-to-day coding in technology again, and I am diving right back into it head first, and I'm having a blast at doing that, which just goes to show that's my main love is the technology, and I've done the leadership thing, and hopefully I can combine both with FM, right? So I can do both. I can still stay in the code, right? So anyway, yeah. So to answer your question, though, it's leadership isn't always right for you, but also I would say, like, I don't know, personally for me, it's like I always have an attitude of saying yes and always wanting to be challenged. When I stopped being challenged, I got uncomfortable. I needed to keep learning at all times, and I'm going to want to learn for the rest of my career. I never want to stop learning. And that's always going to serve you well, I'd say.
Yeah, great advice. It's funny, as you were saying, something that landed with me is I think leadership, and even what you're doing now, we have to lead our customers also, right? So leadership is, you may not have the direct responsibility of people, but
Yeah.
leadership is about influencing people to get from point A to point B.
Yeah.
Right. And, everything that you've said today, really drives home a lot of the points that we've been making is you have to care about the people. At the end of the day, it's, your best boss was someone that believed in you.
Yeah.
It's when you build trust with people, when you build relationships, that's when you source success. And I think that's what it really all comes down to.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. No, that's, you summed it up really well. And, yeah, I really enjoyed this conversation today, Kathy. Thank you so much for having me.
Excellent. Thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it. We've got hands clapping from Justin, and we've had the group engaged, and a lot of kudos to you and what you've been doing, Brian. So thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Thank you so much. And thanks for everyone who joined.
Yep. And thank you to the audience. If you want to learn more about E equals Y, you can follow us at www.e=y.com. And we're actually having a boot camp in May, which will be an opportunity to learn more about your authentic style. So just as Brian knows that he's cool, calm, collected, that's good. You can still lead and be a manager, even though you're not an extrovert. I think there's a perception sometimes that everyone thinks you have to be outgoing and leading with your heart, and that's not true. It's being authentic, being yourself, and showing up as you can. So thank you all, and have a great weekend, and we'll all talk to you soon. Thanks.
Bye, Kathy. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.